entire class of young students with disabilities vanished without a trace during what was supposed to be a routine field trip to Everglades National Park. For 48 hours, there were no answers until a park ranger stumbled across something deep in the swamp, something that would expose the chilling truth behind the children's disappearance and reveal who might have been responsible. Sarah Miller sat in the small conference room of the police station, staring blankly at the growing pile of empty coffee cups on the table, each one marking another hour spent without her son. The buzzing fluorescent lights above only made the dark circles under her eyes more prominent. It had been 48 hours, 48 unbearable hours since Ethan went missing. Her husband, Mark, slouched beside her, shoulders heavy with silent grief. His normally sharp appearance had faded, his shirt wrinkled, jaw unshaven, evidence of 2 long nights spent waiting, hoping, and dreading. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," Detective Garcia said as she entered, carrying a stack of fresh case files. "I know this has been incredibly hard, but I want to bring you up to speed." Sarah sat up, bracing herself. Any scrap of news about Ethan, her 10-year-old son, was better than silence. Ethan wasn't just her boy. He was unique, needing extra care and attention. He had those oversized glasses that never quite stayed in place, and he always insisted on wearing his favorite bright orange shirt, just like he did that morning before he left. "We've mobilized every available unit across 3 counties," Detective Garcia began. "Aerial teams, ground teams, road checkpoints within a 100-mile radius, but we still don't have any solid leads." Mark reached under the table and squeezed Sarah's hand tightly. "How does an entire bus of children just vanish?" he asked, his voice strained with disbelief. Garcia motioned toward the whiteboard. 10 school photos lined the board, smiling, unsuspecting faces of the children. Next to them, photos of the 2 teachers who had accompanied them, Ms. Johnson and Ms. Torres. 12 people had left for that trip. Only 1 had come back, Mr. Wilson, the 3rd teacher. "That's what makes this so baffling," Garcia admitted. "Let me walk you through the timeline again, just in case there's something we've overlooked." Sarah's eyes locked onto Ethan's photo. That lopsided smile, those crooked glasses, the little tuft of hair that never stayed flat, it all felt so painfully close and yet impossibly far. According to the timeline, the special needs class from Oak Ridge Private Academy had departed the main visitor center at 9:30 a.m. on a park-owned tour bus driven by an experienced ranger. Mr. Wilson had stayed behind at the visitor center due to limited seating. "He should have gone instead of one of the others," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "He's stronger. He could have helped." Detective Garcia nodded gently, then continued. "The group was scheduled to return around 12:30 p.m. When they failed to arrive, staff attempted radio contact. After 30 minutes of silence, park rangers were sent to investigate the route, but there was nothing. No vehicle, no signs of a crash, no clues. The bus had simply vanished." "If this was a kidnapping," Sarah asked, "why hasn't anyone contacted us? No ransom? Nothing?" "That's exactly what's puzzling," Garcia replied. "In most abduction cases, demands are made within the first 24 hours. The silence here is alarming." That silence carried an unsettling implication. If it wasn't about money, then what did the perpetrators want? "We've questioned Mr. Wilson thoroughly," Garcia continued. "At first, he was our main point of interest, being the only school staff member who wasn't on the bus. But his alibi checks out. Security footage confirms he never left the visitor center. Multiple people saw him pacing, making panicked calls to the teachers. Sarah remembered Mr. Wilson from school events, a kind, soft-spoken man in his 40s, devoted to helping students like Ethan. The idea that he might be involved had never felt right to her. Then, Detective Garcia said something that made Sarah's heart leap. "We found the bus." Her breath caught in her throat. Hope surged in her chest, but it would be short-lived. Sarah felt the words punch through her exhausted body. "And the children?" she whispered. Detective Garcia's expression shifted before the answer came. The bus was found, but it was empty. A silence filled the room like fog. She continued. It had been driven roughly 7 miles off the designated route and partially hidden in a remote section of the park. Our team has been processing it since last night. So far, no signs of a struggle, no evidence of physical harm. Mark leaned forward, his voice edged with disbelief. What does that even mean? It could suggest the children and staff left the bus willingly, Garcia said cautiously, or they were guided off under conditions that didn't trigger alarm or resistance. That makes no sense, Sarah said, her voice sharp with panic. These were 10 kids with disabilities. Ethan gets overwhelmed in new places. Some are nonverbal. 3 rely on wheelchairs full-time. You're telling me they just walked off calmly into the wilderness? That's why we believe more than one person is involved, Garcia answered. This wasn't spontaneous. It was orchestrated. She moved to the whiteboard and tapped the photo of the man who'd been driving the bus that morning. Carlos Mendez, veteran park staff, 12 years with no red flags on his record. But we're looking deeper. It's possible he was manipulated or complicit. Mark, still trying to make sense of it all, asked, "What if this wasn't random? Could one of the kids have been the target and the others taken to cover it up?" Garcia nodded. "We've been interviewing every family, going over financial records, communications, anything that might point to motive, but so far no links. Nothing stands out." Sarah's gaze drifted toward the children's photos on the board. These faces weren't strangers. They had been in her home. She had seen them laughing in her yard. Ethan had always struggled to make connections, but with this group, he had found belonging. Mark's voice cut through the silence again. Could it be about the program itself? Oak Ridge is private. Tuition's close to 40 grand a year. Every family here has means. Garcia gave a slow nod. It's our strongest theory. The shared financial profile makes them potential targets, but without a message, no demands, we're still guessing. Sarah pressed her fingers to her temples. The idea of Ethan, somewhere out there without his medication, without the comfort of his routines, was almost too much to bear. "What now?" she asked, barely audible. "At first light, we're initiating a full grid search," Garcia said. "We've brought in support teams from nearby counties, airboats, thermal drones, scent tracking dogs, all focused on the swamp perimeter. If they're still in that area, we'll find them." If. That word echoed in Sarah's mind. If they're still there. If they're okay. If there's still time. Garcia placed a comforting hand on the table. "Try to rest if you can. We've set up cots in the break room. We'll notify you immediately if anything comes in." But Sarah knew she wouldn't sleep. Not while Ethan was out there, possibly frightened and waiting, wondering why his mom hadn't come yet. Suddenly the door flung open. A uniformed officer stood there, out of breath, urgency written all over him. "Detective Garcia," he said quickly, bypassing formalities. "You need to come now." Garcia rose immediately, alert. "What is it?" During an initial sector sweep, a ranger found multiple wheelchairs in a remote area. The room spun. "Wheelchairs?" Sarah repeated, barely recognizing her own voice. The officer's eyes flicked to her, then back to Garcia. He hesitated, then added softly, "And 2 individuals, deceased." The world seemed to collapse beneath Sarah's feet. Mark's arm went around her instinctively, steadying her as her knees gave way. "Are they?" she began, but couldn't finish the question. "We don't have identities confirmed yet," Garcia said quickly, grabbing her jacket and radio. "Let's not jump to conclusions. I'm heading to the scene." "We're coming," Mark said firmly, already helping Sarah up. "This is an active investigation. I can't allow—" "That's our child out there," Sarah cut in, her voice no longer weak. "You either take us, or we follow you anyway." A heavy pause, then Garcia nodded. Follow in your own vehicle, but stay back once we're on site. You cannot interfere." Moments later, a convoy of law enforcement vehicles sped into the early morning darkness. No sirens, just flashing lights cutting through the fog. Sarah and Mark followed closely behind in their SUV. Not a word passed between them, only the sound of the tires and the silence filled with dread. Her hand locked around Mark's, gripping with every ounce of strength she had left. "It might not be him," he said finally, barely more than a whisper. "We can't jump to the worst." Sarah gave a numb nod, but in her mind, the worst was already unfolding, frame by frame. Ethan didn't rely on a wheelchair full-time like some of his classmates, but on longer trips, when his balance and energy gave out, he often needed one. As the police caravan veered off onto an unmarked dirt road that gradually narrowed into a rugged trail, it became clear the vehicles wouldn't be able to go much farther. Eventually, the SUVs stopped and the group continued on foot. Mark helped Sarah through the thickening mud as they moved behind a line of officers navigating the dense underbrush. When they stepped into the clearing, the sight that met them was chilling. Multiple police units had already arrived, their lights flashing across the swamp water in red and blue bursts. Forensic technicians, clad in white suits, worked carefully, setting evidence markers and snapping photographs. Yellow tape marked the perimeter, and there, partially sunken in the shallow, murky water, lay the wheelchairs. Sarah instinctively began to count. 7 in total, arranged in a loose semicircle. Their bright frames, pink, blue, green, purple, looked grotesquely out of place against the somber tones of the swamp. Some were visibly damaged, twisted wheels, cracked footrests, seat cushions soaked and stained. Detective Garcia stepped in front of them. "This is as far as you go," she said firmly, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder. Sarah tried to look past her, her voice barely audible. The bodies?" Garcia's tone softened. "They've already been removed from the scene and are being transported to the coroner's office." Sarah followed the movement of 2 stretchers being carried through the marsh. The black body bags bounced slightly with every step. One of them, noticeably smaller, caused her breath to catch. Suddenly, shouting broke out on the other side of the clearing. A couple was pushing past the perimeter. Sarah recognized them instantly. David and Elizabeth Jacobson. Their daughter Sophie was in Ethan's class. "That's Sophie's backpack!" Elizabeth cried, pointing to a purple bag covered in butterfly patches, now sitting on a tarp marked as evidence. David collapsed to his knees in the mud, overwhelmed. Officers stepped in to gently hold Elizabeth back from crossing the line as she screamed her daughter's name. Detective Garcia quickly approached them, guiding the Jacobsons away from the scene and toward a quieter area. When she returned, her expression was heavy. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," she said. "We've made a preliminary identification. One of the victims appears to be Sophie Jacobson. The other is Ms. Johnson, one of the teachers." A wave of grief surged through Sarah. Pain for Sophie's family, and beneath it, a terrible, quiet relief. Ethan wasn't one of them. The guilt of that relief made her stomach turn. Mark tried to ask, but his voice faltered. How did they? Garcia lowered her voice. "The forensic report indicates both suffered close-range gunshot wounds. There was no accident, no natural cause. This was planned." Sarah felt herself sway. Mark pulled her closer, anchoring her. Garcia continued, "The wheelchairs were damaged on purpose. It seems the people behind this no longer needed them, after choosing who to take." The silence that followed made the meaning clear. Someone had decided who lived and who didn't. Sarah's eyes scanned the scene again, her instincts kicking in. The wheelchairs. Look at how they're arranged. That's not random. They're positioned deliberately. Garcia turned, studying the pattern. "You're right, it's staged, almost like someone wanted them to be found." "But why?" Mark asked. If they're trying to cover their tracks, why leave something so obvious? It might be a message, Garcia said, or a misdirection. A man in a medical examiner's jacket approached, nodding respectfully before giving Garcia his report. Estimated time of death is 10 to 12 hours ago. They were alive at least a day after the group disappeared. Sarah's mind raced. If Sophie and Ms. Johnson had still been alive that long, then maybe, just maybe, the others were still out there. "We need to widen the search area," she said urgently. "If they were left here, the rest could be nearby." Garcia nodded. "Already in progress. Air support arrives at first light. We've deployed additional drones and tracking dogs trained for swamp terrain." As the sky began to lighten, casting early gold across the water, the full extent of what had happened here became impossible to ignore. The wheelchairs stood in the clearing, haunting and still, as officers continued their search. Somewhere beyond the trees, helicopters were arriving. More officers, more gear, more questions. "He's alive," Sarah whispered, as if saying it out loud might make it true. "I would feel it if he wasn't." Mark nodded, his eyes locked on the horizon as dawn broke over the swamp, its shadows long, its secrets darker still. By mid-morning, the isolated clearing had become a hive of activity. Cameras buzzed in the distance, news helicopters circling like birds of prey, and back at the park's entrance, a wave of reporters and vans with blinking satellite dishes waited, ready to tell the world what little they knew, while the truth still hid in the depths of the Everglades. As the sun rose over the Everglades, the story had already ignited national headlines. Camera crews filled the visitor center parking lot. News anchors spoke in urgent tones as more law enforcement vehicles continued to arrive. The headline now plastered across every major network: "Disabled children missing, 2 found dead in Florida swamp." The shock reverberated across the country. Within hours, the FBI had taken over the case, establishing a command center inside the park's main building. Leading the investigation was Special Agent Daniels, a no-nonsense professional in her early 40s, known for her methodical approach and sharp instincts. Her cropped hair and focused demeanor gave her a commanding presence as she stepped behind a temporary podium in front of a wall of flashing cameras, flanked by local authorities and park officials. "At approximately 5:42 this morning," she announced, "our search teams located the remains of 2 individuals connected to the Oak Ridge Academy disappearance." Her voice was steady, controlled. "We can confirm one of the victims as Sophie Jacobson, age 9, and the other as Catherine Johnson, a 34-year-old teacher at the academy. Due to the sensitivity of this investigation and out of respect for the families, we will not release details regarding their condition or cause of death at this time." Before she could finish, reporters erupted with questions. Is this being treated as terrorism? Were there ransom demands? Do you have suspects in custody? Are the remaining children still believed to be alive? Daniels raised a hand, signaling for silence. "We are pursuing multiple leads and are using every available resource to locate the missing children and their teacher. We urge anyone with information, no matter how small, to contact the FBI tip line immediately." Then, a uniformed officer stepped forward and handed Agent Daniels a folded note. She opened it, read quickly, and her jaw tightened. "This press conference is now concluded. Updates will follow." Without another word, Agent Daniels turned from the podium and strode briskly back into the building, toward a private room where the parents of the missing children were waiting in tense silence. 8 sets of parents sat in a circle of metal chairs. Some gripped each other's hands, others stared at the floor, lost in their own silent anguish. The Jacobsons were absent, taken elsewhere to identify their daughter and begin the process no parent ever wants to face. Daniels didn't waste time. "We've received a ransom demand," she said plainly. Gasps swept through the room. Her delivery was blunt, far more clinical than the comforting tone Detective Garcia had used just hours earlier. The demand was emailed 15 minutes ago to the school's administration office, Daniels continued. They are asking for $2 million in unmarked bills within 24 hours in exchange for the safe return of the remaining 8 children and their teacher, Ms. Reyes. James Whitaker, a wealthy investment banker and father of twins Ryan and Tyler, shot to his feet. "Let me see it." Agent Daniels hesitated only briefly before turning her tablet to face the group. The message was displayed on screen, the tone cold and calculated. "We have your children. Sophie Jacobson and Katherine Johnson were removed to show our seriousness. The others will be released upon delivery of $2 million in cash. You have 24 hours. Each 12-hour delay will result in another casualty. Families of Oak Ridge Academy can easily afford this modest fee for their children's lives." Below the text was a blurry but unmistakable photo. The 8 missing children and Ms. Reyes sat huddled on a concrete floor, backs against a wall. The lighting was dim, their faces tired and afraid. But to Sarah Miller, only one face mattered. "Ethan," she breathed. He was there, in his orange shirt. His glasses were gone, his face streaked with tears. But he was alive. Her hand instinctively reached toward the screen, then stopped mid-air. "He's okay," she whispered to herself. "He's still okay." Agent Daniels spoke again. "The timing of this email is not random. It came just minutes after news of the recovered bodies aired on national media. This was strategic, designed for maximum pressure." Rebecca Chen, whose daughter Lily appeared barely visible in the photo, shook her head in disbelief. "Do they think we won't pay? I'll sell everything today if I have to." Daniels nodded. The message also included a detailed appendix listing each family's financial assets, property, business records, stock portfolios, information not easily available online. That revelation changed the room's tone. "They've done their homework," Daniels said grimly. "This may indicate either inside access or extensive background research." Immediately, several parents stepped forward to offer funds. James Whitaker declared he would cover half of the ransom himself. Others quickly followed, pledging whatever they could. The countdown had begun. The clock was now ticking, not just on money, but on lives. Parents rushed to make calls, to banks, to attorneys, to financial advisors, desperate to liquidate assets as fast as possible. The room buzzed with urgent conversations, but Agent Daniels quickly raised her hand. "I need to be absolutely clear about the FBI's position," she said, her tone measured but firm. "We do not authorize ransom payments in kidnapping cases." James Whitaker, pacing near the edge of the room, turned sharply. "That's your child in that photo," he snapped, pointing at Sarah and Mark. "What's your policy on that?" Daniels didn't flinch. "I understand your anger, but experience has shown us that paying ransoms rarely ends in a safe return. Once money is delivered, those holding hostages have no reason to keep anyone alive." "So what are you saying?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "That we're supposed to just wait? Hope you find them before the deadline?" "We are deploying every available resource," Daniels assured her. "Our cyber team is tracing the origin of the message. Financial experts are monitoring possible payment channels. Tactical units are ready to launch the moment we identify a location." Mark spoke softly from beside her. "And if you don't find them in time?" The room fell silent. Daniels didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "We're preparing a public statement. It will say that we will not engage with the kidnappers. It's standard, meant to stall, to buy us more time." "You're using our kids as leverage," Rebecca Chen whispered, her voice hollow. "We're doing everything we can to save them," Daniels replied, firmly but not unkindly. "That is our only goal." Within the hour, the FBI's message went live. Every major network aired the same broadcast. Agent Daniels, composed and cold, standing before the cameras. "The United States does not negotiate with hostage takers. We will pursue those responsible with the full weight of the law." Sarah watched the statement play out on a small TV in the break room, a numb horror creeping into her gut. "They're going to take another child," she whispered to Mark. "They'll think we don't care." Before he could answer, the door opened and Agent Daniels returned, flanked by Detective Garcia. "We have a working theory," Daniels began. "Given the financial details in the message and the precision of the targeting, we believe someone with direct access to school and family information is involved." "Mr. Wilson?" Sarah asked, thinking of the male teacher who had stayed behind that day. Garcia shook her head. "Actually, we've placed him under protective custody. If our theory is right, he may have been left out of the plan deliberately. He might be a witness, not a suspect." "Then who?" Mark asked. Daniel stepped forward. "We're reviewing all school staff who have access to student records and financial documentation. Oak Ridge Academy's scholarship process requires complete financial disclosures, even for families who don't apply. That means someone had access to very specific, very personal data." Sarah felt her chest tighten. Someone had looked at their children, not with empathy or care, but as numbers, as potential payouts. Someone had measured grief, calculated fear, and decided how much pain it would take to get parents to empty everything they had. And now, with the FBI refusing to cooperate, that same someone was choosing who would be next. By mid-afternoon, drained and spiraling, Sarah returned home while Mark stayed behind at the command center. Their spacious home in Coral Gables, once a place of safety, felt colder than ever without Ethan's voice echoing through it. She walked slowly to his room. The dinosaur stickers on the door reminded her of his latest obsession. Inside, the bed was still unmade, the way he'd left it that morning. A half-built Lego structure waited on the desk. His favorite books were stacked on the nightstand, slightly crooked. At his medication drawer, she carefully gathered his anti-seizure prescriptions, the specialized ones he needed daily. The pill organizer wouldn't help anyone else. Without a proper schedule or dosage, any lapse could trigger a dangerous episode. The thought of him suffering somewhere, confused and in pain, made her stomach twist. She was just slipping the bottles into her purse when her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was cold, digitally altered, robotic, impossible to tell if it was a man or woman. "Is this Sarah Miller, mother of Ethan?" "Yes," she whispered, her hand already reaching for the FBI's recording device. "Who is this?" she asked. "That's not important," the voice replied. "What is important is that your son has already missed 2 doses of his medication." Sarah froze. They knew. Whoever this was, they knew Ethan's medical condition, his schedule, his vulnerability. "Since the FBI has made it clear they won't pay," the voice continued, "we're offering private terms, just for you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. 500,000 for your son. No one else. You bring the money. You get Ethan back. Simple transaction. "I need to speak to him," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady as she activated the recording device. "I have to know he's okay." "You'll get your proof," the voice replied flatly. "Check your messages in 2 minutes." Then it added, more sharply, "But understand this, if you involve law enforcement or the FBI, your son dies. This offer is good for 3 hours. After that, we move on, to parents who care more." The call ended abruptly. Sarah stood frozen in Ethan's room, her phone still in hand, her heart pounding. Her first instinct was to call Mark or the FBI, but the threat echoed through her mind. What if they were watching? What if they were monitoring every call from the command center? She paced back and forth, clutching her phone, waiting for the text that would either bring hope or break her completely. When it came, her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped the phone. The image showed Ethan, alive, pale and frightened, holding that morning's Miami Herald as proof. His glasses were gone, his eyes red. He stared directly into the camera, his lips pressed into a tight line. He'd been changed into a plain gray t-shirt. His orange one was missing. A timestamp confirmed the photo had been taken less than 30 minutes earlier. Another message came seconds later, short and chilling. $500,000 cash. Come alone. 1 hour, no police. Sarah's mind spun. The FBI had made their policy clear. No ransom payments. But this wasn't their child, and the kidnappers knew exactly what they were doing, isolating parents, manipulating their fear, betting that someone would break. She ran to the home office and opened the safe behind Mark's framed diplomas. Emergency cash, barely $3,000, some passports, and a stack of documents. Not enough, not even close. From there, she moved to her jewelry box, her engagement ring, diamond earrings, a Tiffany bracelet her mother had given her, Mark's Rolex, barely worn, but treasured. She dumped it all into her purse, along with Ethan's medication. Then she drove. Her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. She couldn't think, could barely breathe. At the bank, the branch manager recognized her instantly and looked concerned at her appearance. "Mrs. Miller, are you all right?" he asked gently as she requested a large withdrawal. "Family emergency," she said quickly, avoiding his eyes. "I need to pull as much cash as I can, right now." The manager hesitated, then explained, "We don't keep that kind of cash available. Even with your balances, the most we can release immediately is around $70,000. Anything larger needs advance notice." "Then give me the $70,000, Sarah replied, desperation leaking through her voice. "Now please." While the manager made the necessary calls, Sarah tried the kidnapper's number, straight to voicemail. No surprise. It was likely a burner phone, disposable and untraceable. 20 minutes later, she walked out of the bank with a thick envelope of cash. It wasn't enough. Back in her car, her phone buzzed again. Portside Industrial Park, Building 17. Enter through the loading dock. 1 hour. Come alone or he dies. Sarah stared at the message, then at the envelope in her lap. She had the cash, the jewelry, the medication, but it still wasn't the amount they'd asked for. Would they even accept it? She drove home and scribbled a note for Mark. Following up on a possible lead, someone in the neighborhood said they saw something yesterday. "I'll call soon. Love you." It was vague and thin, but she couldn't risk telling him the truth. If he called the FBI, Ethan's life might end. Before she left, she stopped at their bedroom door, her eyes falling on Mark's nightstand. The drawer slid open with a soft creak. Inside was the handgun they'd purchased years ago for home protection, a Glock 9mm. She had resisted it at the time, but Mark had made sure they both knew how to use it. Now, with trembling hands, she checked that it was loaded, then placed it into her bag. Cash, jewelry, medication, a weapon. She entered the address into her GPS. The location was nearly 40 minutes away, an old warehouse district near the port, mostly abandoned. As she drove, she checked her mirrors constantly, half expecting to see federal agents behind her, or worse, the people who had taken Ethan. A voice of reason in her mind tried to break through. This is reckless. It could be a trap. Even if you pay, what's stopping them from taking the money and silencing you forever? But reason had no place in a mother's desperation. As she approached the Portside Industrial Park, it became clear the place had long since fallen into decay. Most of the warehouses were boarded up, broken windows, graffiti-covered walls. The streets were cracked, overgrown with weeds and silence. Building 17 sat at the very edge of the property, nearly swallowed by vegetation. Sarah pulled into the lot slowly, heart racing. She had come alone, but she wasn't ready. Sarah parked her SUV behind the building, just as instructed, tucked out of sight, far from the street and prying eyes. The area was unnervingly quiet, broken only by the distant hum of shipping equipment and the occasional cry of a seagull. The loading dock door was raised just enough for someone to crouch and slip under. She tightened her grip on the purse that held the cash, her jewelry, Ethan's medication, and the handgun. Her mind screamed at her to stop, to turn around. But the image of Ethan holding that newspaper pushed her forward. She ducked under the door and stepped into the shadows of the massive warehouse. Dim light filtered in through cracked and boarded windows, casting long beams through the dusty air. The place smelled of rust, dampness, and something chemical she couldn't quite place. Her shoes clicked softly against the concrete, each step echoing like a warning. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling despite her best effort to steady it. "I'm here. For my son." "Stop right there," a voice ordered from the darkness. It was male, calm, controlled. "Put the bag down and step back 6 feet." She slowly lowered the purse to the ground, then backed away, her heart pounding so violently she thought they might hear it. 2 men stepped out from the shadows. Both wore ski masks. The taller one held a gun at his side with unsettling ease. His stance and movement suggested training. From under his mask, a scar curved from his jawline toward his neck. The shorter man approached the bag, weapon still pointed at her. He knelt and quickly checked the contents. "Where is my son?" Sarah asked, her voice firmer now. The man ignored her, pulling out the envelope of cash and flipping through it. His face twisted. 70 grand? He said, looking up in disbelief. "We said $500,000. "I brought jewelry," Sarah said quickly. "Real diamonds, designer pieces. They're worth more than what's missing. I couldn't get more cash in time." He examined the pieces one by one, then gave a curt nod to his partner. "With the cash, maybe 200 total, still short." "Where is my son?" she demanded again. The taller man gave a subtle hand signal. A side door creaked open, and a third man emerged, pushing a wheelchair. Ethan was in it. Small, terrified, his wrists zip-tied to the armrests. Tape covered his mouth. The chair was too large for him, clearly not his own, but his eyes locked on Sarah immediately. Even through the fear, even with his glasses missing, she saw the recognition. "Ethan!" she cried, stepping forward instinctively, but the gun lifted slightly, stopping her cold. "This isn't how it works," the taller man said calmly. "The deal was clear, 500,000 in full." "I'll get the rest," Sarah said desperately. "Please, he needs his medication. It's in the bag. He could have seizures without it. Look, just let me give it to him." The 3 men huddled together, voices low. The shortest one gestured angrily at the money. The man who had wheeled Ethan in kept glancing at the exit nervously. Then the leader stepped forward again. His movements were slow, deliberate. "We've got a problem," he said. "You've seen too much. Enough of our faces." That wasn't the plan. He paused, watching her closely. "Originally, we were going to let the boy go. Quietly. But now, with this partial payment, we need new leverage to make sure the rest of the money shows up." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Take me instead," she blurted. "Let Ethan go. Give him the medication, and I'll go with you. Hold me until my husband brings the rest." The leader tilted his head slightly, considering. "Not a bad offer," he said at last. "Your husband will be even more motivated to pay if he's trying to get you both back." Then he turned. "Get the kid back in the van. We're moving them to the harbor." Sarah's heart jumped. The harbor. That meant the others were there. The other children. "No, please, let me give him his medicine," she begged, as Ethan was turned around and wheeled back toward the door. The leader stepped closer. "You don't give orders here. You broke the terms. Now you deal with the fallout." Without warning, he raised his gun and struck her across the temple with its grip. Pain exploded across Sarah's head. She stumbled back, the room spinning, warmth trickling down the side of her face. Blood. She reached for her temple, eyes blurred. her vision barely focused in time to see Ethan thrashing in the wheelchair, trying to scream through the tape. The man's voice was ice. "You walk to the van, or we sedate you and drag you. Your choice." Trembling, Sarah steadied herself. Her fingers came away sticky with blood. She looked at Ethan, terrified, gagged, but alive, and she made the only choice she could. "I'll go," she whispered. "Just don't hurt him again." The leader gave a sharp nod to the others. They began collecting the cash and jewelry, while Sarah, dizzy but determined, tried to memorize every detail, every voice, every gesture, every slip they made. If they got out of this alive, she'd remember it all, and she'd make sure these men never touched another child again. Just as Sarah was being forced toward the waiting van, a sudden sound shattered the tense silence. Faint at first, then rapidly building. The unmistakable wail of police sirens echoed from all directions. The low, pulsing thump of helicopter blades followed overhead. Blue and red lights began to strobe through the cracked windows of the warehouse. "What the—" The shorter kidnapper rushed to a window and peeked through a gap. "They're everywhere. Full tactical response. You brought them." The scarred leader spun towards Sarah, raising his weapon to her face. "You were wired." "No," she cried. "I swear, I came alone, just like you said." The third man, who had been holding Ethan's wheelchair, abandoned it and pulled a weapon of his own. "We need to move. Now. Back exit. Secondary vehicle." The kidnappers erupted into chaos, shouting over each other, grabbing whatever gear they could. But in that moment, Sarah wasn't thinking. She moved. She lunged for Ethan, reaching the wheelchair as the leader turned and fired. The shot missed by inches, striking a concrete pillar and spraying dust and shards into the air. "Run!" she yelled, frantically tearing at the zip ties on Ethan's wrists. "Get behind something! Now!" The sound of breaking glass and forced doors filled the air as law enforcement stormed the building. Tactical boots hit the floor. Voices barked commands. Sarah ripped the tape from Ethan's mouth and pulled him from the chair, half dragging, half carrying him toward a stack of crates for cover. But then he appeared. The scarred leader stepped into their path, eyes full of fury. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. He lifted the gun. Sarah turned instinctively, shielding Ethan with her own body just as the shot rang out. The impact slammed into her upper back and shoulder, a blast of heat and pain that knocked her forward. Still, somehow, she held on to Ethan, stumbling the last few steps behind the crates before collapsing. "Mom!" Ethan's voice was panicked and high, but it sounded distant to her, like it was coming through a tunnel. She could feel blood soaking her back, pain radiating through her body, and her limbs growing cold. "Stay low," she whispered, using the last of her strength to push Ethan down behind the crates. Gunfire erupted around them. SWAT teams flooded the warehouse from multiple points, engaging the kidnappers in a fierce exchange. Sarah, her vision dimming, saw flashes of movement. Figures in tactical gear, weapons raised, moving with deadly precision. She watched through fading sight as the scarred leader fired again and again, backing toward them. Then, impact. His body jerked as bullets struck his chest and abdomen. He staggered, tried to raise his gun again, then collapsed just feet from where Sarah and Ethan were hidden. The shorter man dropped his weapon and surrendered, hands raised in defeat. The third tried to escape through a side door, but was tackled by two officers as they burst through, weapons drawn. The shooting stopped, and then she heard it, Mark's voice. "Sarah! Ethan!" he called, frantic, somewhere nearby. She tried to answer, but her voice barely left her throat. Her blood loss was catching up. Her limbs were going numb. "Daddy!" Ethan shouted, standing and waving toward the noise. "We're over here! Mom's hurt!" Mark appeared seconds later, escorted by a tactical officer. His face turned pale at the sight of Sarah slumped against the crates, blood soaking her back. "The bank called me," he explained quickly, rushing to her side. "They were worried about the withdrawal. I checked your phone's location and called the FBI." He knelt, pressing his hands to her wound. "They moved as soon as I gave them the coordinates." Sarah struggled to stay focused, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said the others were at the harbor." "Medic!" Mark shouted, hands now slick with her blood. "Stay with me, Sarah. Just hang on." Paramedics rushed in. Mark was moved aside as the team got to work, cutting away clothing, applying pressure, assessing her condition with calm urgency. "Gunshot wound, upper back," one paramedic reported. "Through and through. Significant blood loss. She's conscious, but showing early signs of shock." As they prepared to move her onto a stretcher, Sarah grabbed one medic's sleeve weakly. "His medication," she said, pointing at Ethan. "It's in my purse. He needs it now." The paramedic nodded, and another quickly retrieved the bag, pulling out the prescription bottles she'd packed earlier. "I'll make sure he gets it," Mark promised, holding Ethan protectively. "We'll be right behind you." "The police are taking us to the hospital." The medics carefully lifted Sarah onto the stretcher, strapping her in, stabilizing the IV line as they moved swiftly toward the waiting ambulance. As Sarah was wheeled toward the waiting ambulance, pressure still held tightly against her wound, she caught fleeting glimpses of the chaos unfolding behind her. The once empty warehouse now swarmed with law enforcement. The scarred ringleader's body lay covered beneath a sheet. The other two kidnappers were being loaded into separate police vehicles, their hands cuffed tightly behind their backs. "Stay with Ethan," she whispered to Mark, struggling to keep her eyes open. "Don't leave him alone." "We're right behind you," he promised, his voice cracking. "Just stay with us, Sarah. Stay strong." The ambulance doors shut, and the last image Sarah saw was Ethan's frightened face, clutching his father's hand, eyes wide as she was taken away. Inside the ambulance, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. A paramedic monitored her vitals while a police officer leaned close. "I know this is hard," he said gently, "but if you can speak, anything you remember could help us find the other children." The paramedic objected. She needed rest, but Sarah nodded weakly, forcing herself to focus. "I heard them say something about moving the product to the harbor." "A warehouse," she whispered. The officer immediately relayed her words into his radio. "Possible location confirmed. Redirect all units to the harbor district. Tactical response en route." The paramedic adjusted her IV. "The bullet passed through your shoulder cleanly. No vital organs hit, but you've lost a lot of blood. You're going to need surgery, but you're stable. We'll be at the hospital in minutes." "My son," Sarah murmured. "Your husband and son are following behind us," he said calmly. "He's with Ethan now, and he's already gotten his medication." As they neared the hospital, more updates came over the officer's radio, confirmation that teams were converging on the port of Miami. Sarah faded again, exhaustion dragging her down, but a sense of hope slowly pushed through the fog. She was rushed into emergency care. The last thing she saw before the anesthesia took hold was the determined faces of doctors and nurses preparing for surgery. When Sarah finally woke, it was to the soft beeping of monitors and the low hum of a recovery room. Her vision cleared. Mark was beside her, holding her hand. Ethan was there too, in a different wheelchair, his eyes tired but filled with relief. He leaned in carefully and hugged her, avoiding her bandages. Sarah wrapped her good arm around him and didn't let go. "How's Ethan?" she asked, barely audible. "The pediatric team's already seen him," Mark said. "No major injuries. He's weak, dehydrated, shaken up, but okay. A psychologist came by earlier. They'll keep checking in." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed with gratitude. Then she asked the question she'd been dreading. "The other children?" Mark hesitated. "They don't have all the details yet." One of the men from the warehouse started talking, trying to make a deal. A knock at the door broke the silence. Detective Garcia stepped in, visibly relieved to see Sarah awake. "Thanks to what you told us in the ambulance," she said, "we moved fast. Our teams raided several locations at the port 2 hours ago. We found the rest of the children." Sarah's breath caught. "They're alive," Garcia confirmed. "Some needed immediate care. They're now at different hospitals depending on what each child needed. But you saved them, every single one." Then came the most stunning revelation of all. One of the people we arrested was Ms. Torres. Sarah blinked, confused. "That can't be. She's one of the teachers. She was taken with them." "She wasn't," Garcia said gently. "She helped plan it." According to the preliminary interviews, Torres had racked up serious gambling debts. She used her access at the school to feed personal information, family finances, routines, vulnerabilities to the kidnappers. She even helped choose the date and destination of the field trip. The plan, Garcia continued, was to collect individual ransoms and eliminate children to pressure the others. She was deeply involved from the start. Sarah was stunned. Ms. Torres had taught Ethan for years. "She showed no remorse during questioning," Garcia said. "We'll be reviewing the school's hiring practices." She passed all their checks, but clearly something was missed. Ethan curled closer to his mother, and Sarah instinctively pulled him in, holding him tightly. They weren't the same family that had walked into Everglades National Park 2 days ago. The scars, physical and emotional, would remain. They wouldn't fully return to normal. Trust had been broken. Innocence lost. Grief would linger for what almost was, and what very nearly wasn't stopped in time. But for now, her son was in her arms. Her husband was by her side, and they were alive. That was enough.